Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. Dada, with episode 630 of your favorite professional wrestling podcast. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, and it is Thursday, so you know exactly what that means. We are going to break down everything that happened across NXT and AEW this week. But not only that, folks, this show will serve as your AEW All In London 2024 Ultimate Preview. The Silver King and Vintage Chris Vanini will break down every single match on the card. We will discuss how AEW got to those matches, our predictions for them this coming weekend in London, and of course, what we expect to happen on AEW television coming out of All In with that quick turnaround to AEW All Out. Of course, we will be breaking down what happened across AEW television and NXT TV, as well as that brand builds to NXT No Mercy in 2 weeks' time. So yes, this is a loaded episode as always. Right off the top, allow the Silver King to remind you that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
So be sure to head on over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast and follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. You're especially going to want to make sure you follow us on Twitter, again, at Getting Overcast this weekend. That way you can vote in our pre- and post-show polls surrounding AEW All In. You can get to give us an expectation grade, a final grade, and we, of course, will discuss those grades on our AEW All In Instant Analysis podcast coming up Sunday night shortly after AEW All In goes off the air. Please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month, or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You will get bonus audio. It is called the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major television show, and exclusive news posts on Friday. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Please support the continuation of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. Now, all of that said, as mentioned, we have a ton to discuss. We're going to dive into a busy week in NXT, a huge week in AEW, and of course, we will have the AEW All In Ultimate Preview for you at the end of the show.
But I'm afraid I've got some news.
And there are a couple items I wanted to discuss right off the top here. Tavian Heights and Josh Briggs, they truly seem to be making noise in Japan at the N1 for Pro Wrestling Noah. Heights in particular has been getting highlighted constantly. Now, Michi Marufuji gave him permission to use one of his moves. The Great Muda talked about how natural he is as a wrestler, suplexing people. He started doing a running belly to belly that looks super cool. He tried sumo wrestling. The crowd is loving him. It's really cool to see a young WWE talent go on a real excursion for the first time in a long time. I actually cannot remember the last time you could say that. And I'm talking about an extended excursion for a talent. I can't remember the last time a signed WWE superstar did something like this, and it seems to be making all the difference for Heights. It's to the point where I thought, oh, this kid's talented, and I think he'll make the main roster one day just because he has the looks, he has skills in the ring, and he can speak. He'll get there. Now I'm starting to think this might be a guy that we need to keep an eye on, like for real going forward. So we'll see what happens when he comes back and rejoins the No Quarter Catch crew and with everything that happens there. But he is getting major praise in Japan, and that is cool to see. There was a report Tuesday that Warner Brothers Discovery has sent over another media rights offer to AEW. By the way, Tony Khan has also been wearing WBD and now Max hats on interviews over the last 2 weeks. And by the way, this is not a guy who wears hats frequently, so it's clearly purposeful what he's doing. We have discussed for months on this podcast, and by the way, also on buymeacoffee.com/gettingover, that a deal between these parties, AEW and WBD, it's certain. And once it is ultimately struck, AEW will finally become profitable. The devil, though, is going to be in the details, as it always is. The most recent report, this came from Fightful, is that the contract will be at least double. And that does sound great on the surface. But again, AEW is presently losing money, and it has been undervalued. And it was reportedly looking to triple its media rights initially, not double them. There's also the consideration of what will they be getting paid, quote unquote, at least double for. Is that just for the 3 television shows? Does that include streaming rights? Is there a pay-per-view component? Will the pay-per-view component include less expensive shows where, let's say, for example, you subscribe to Max, and if you pay $50 for the year extra, you get all the shows, or $10 extra per month to get AEW access? Like, what is that going to look like? How will that affect the money that AEW brings in both to itself and to Warner Brothers Discovery? Again, the devil is in the details. We don't know all of those answers. So you can't necessarily say, oh, if they get X dollar amount, that is a great value for them. That is plenty of money that they're making, because you're not going to know what it's for until, of course, it is officially announced. Now, all of that said, if they can double their revenue, they become profitable. And that is the goal, to have a profitable major number 2 wrestling company. There's never really been a consideration in my mind that that would not happen. The other thing that's important is that AEW has an owner in Tony Khan who is not looking to get out of this. It's not like he created AEW so that way he could sell it in 5 years and make a profit. He created AEW because he's always wanted to run a professional wrestling company. So this thing is not going anywhere probably ever. I mean, even if, attendance starts dropping a little bit and they don't do as well ratings wise, and maybe on their next TV contract or media rights contract, it's not what they hope, they're still going to have something somewhere, and they're still going to be making money, and fans are still going to be going to those shows. So I don't necessarily always understand the hand-wringing around AEW when it comes to it as a business. I think there's a lot of criticisms that it deserves when it comes to its creative and its booking, and certainly the way Tony, positions the company and the way he represents it and things he says in the media. But in terms of it working as a business, to me, that's never been a question. There have also been some rumors swirling this week about Ricky Starks and his AEW contract already expiring, with, of course, him expected to join WWE and likely start in NXT. Now, I say this not so flippantly. This would be news to us if we hadn't been reporting as much for months on buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. In fact, I believe the first time we reported it was June 21st, which is exactly 2 months ago to the day. There was a belief among some talent that his contract would expire at the end of July. We could never confirm that with a second source, and we could never actually confirm it with a particular date. So we never said as much on buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. If Stark's contract has already expired, and if he has already signed with WWE, which we cannot tell you is definitive, we can only say that has been the expectation from multiple people across multiple companies for multiple months. A debut for him at No Mercy next Sunday, or the first NXT on the CW would make a ton of sense. The latter in particular, because CM Punk is going to be on that show, and he could definitely put Starks over upon his arrival. So if his contract has expired and if he is already signed with WWE, keep your eyes out for the next 2 weeks. The go-home edition of NXT next week, ahead of No Mercy, that was actually taped Tuesday night after the live show. No spoilers will be said here, other than to note there was a debut of a popular TNA women's wrestler on the show, so that is at least something that you can look forward to. But there is an interesting note, and that is that NXT will not tape another show in the WWE Performance Center in Orlando for nearly an entire month. The next 4 shows are pre-taped. Then you have No Mercy in Denver, the CW debut in Chicago, and then episode 2 of the CW in St. Louis. So NXT will not return to Orlando for a television taping or for anything until September 17th, which is like 28 days away. So folks, that wraps up the news portion of today's show. We are going to move into our full breakdown of the week in NXT. Then we're going to do it a little bit different. We're going to cover everything that happened on AEW Collision and Rampage from the weekend. And then, because I am actually taping this show in 2 parts, because Vintage Chris Vanini is going to join for that AEW All In Ultimate Preview, we will either cover extraneous content on Dynamite first and then talk about AEW All In, or it is quite possible everything that happens on Dynamite directly has to do with All In, which really should be the case. And if so, then we will cover all of that in the AEW All In Ultimate Preview. There will be timestamps in the episode description, as there always are. So be sure to check that if you wish to jump around. If you're listening to us over the weekend and you just want to get your preview of AEW All In, you can hit that timestamp. But as always, I hope you listen to the entire show. As I mentioned, we're kicking off with NXT, and that show opened on Tuesday with footage of the contenders in the women's gauntlet eliminator match walking into the Performance Center. Finally, after months of safety, violence returned to the NXT parking lot as Izzy Dame attacked Carmen Petrovic. Ava later told her minions that Petrovic was out of the match. They argued, and Dame demanded to take her spot. Ava denied, saying she's not going to reward bad behavior. So she gave that spot to Brynlee Reese. Now, my hope here was that Izzy would attack Brynlee, given, she beat her in 4 minutes last week, and she's a heel, and she just attacked one person, so why would she not attack another? But this was a dumb decision by Ava. Okay, sure, you don't want to reward bad behavior, but how about you also don't reward someone in Brynlee who is literally 0-8 in NXT TV singles matches this entire year, especially when you have other options across the division. The faces commiserated later in the locker room. Ren Sinclair referred to Charlie Dempsey as Charles and called their group the Ren QCC. The personality with her totally shines through. So let's talk about this women's gauntlet eliminator. It was for the number 1 contendership, the winner facing Roxanne Perez at No Mercy. The rules were a new entrant every 3 minutes, eliminations as they come via pinfall or submission. Perfect. Exactly what I wanted last week. Sol Ruca and Ren Sinclair started before Adriana Rizzo came in with a double flying crossbody and some suplexes. Sol caught Rizzo with a codebreaker and a powerbomb out of a fireman's carry for the first elimination. Reese survived into the match. Dame did not attack her and take her out. She hit 2 fireman's carry cutters before Kendall Gray entered 5th. She hit a Hurricanrana on Sol and a toss belly to belly, plus a really unique turnover slam on Reese to eliminate her. Gray was going like one move after another, basically showing off everything she's ever learned in the Performance Center in a span of 90 seconds. It was surprising how much she had in her repertoire, though a lot of it was not smooth, which is why one theoretically does not do too much until they have the experience to execute all the moves perfectly. Ruka caught her in a surfboard, then did some impressive moves and a moonsault outside. Jada Parker entered last, immediately threw Sol over the barricade. Then she countered a crossbody inside, hitting the teardrop and a front slam for the elimination. She is simply too good not to have a move better than that and Hypnotic as a finisher to end matches. I will scream about that constantly. Hypnotic should be a signature setup move. She should have another devastating finisher. The front slam was absolutely nothing. Anyway, back to the match. Ren caught Jada in an O'Connor roll, and Sol saw this happening. So she took her out of the pinning combination with like a basement soul snatcher, jumped off the ropes and hit a cutter. A foot from the canvas. It was pretty crazy. I audibly gasped at the move, and the crowd went wild. It was awesome. That left the final 2 as we expected, Sol and Jada. Parker caught Ruka midair, trying a springboard for a Falcon Arrow. Something happened. I couldn't tell whether it was a botch or somewhat purposeful. Sol then tried her top rope cartwheel. Jada just walked away from it. Again, I'm not sure if that was purposeful or she was hurt and she just didn't want to take the move. Ruka then hit a cross-armed German suplex. Parker avoided a springboard splash. Jada then caught Sol sitting up with Hypnotic to win the number 1 contendership from the 6th spot. Out the Mud celebrated with her in the ring. Parker then cut another of her real-ass promos, saying she's hyped. She called herself a difference maker, and she said she's got next, even if Roxanne Perez is a great champion. So we got the expected final 2 and the expected winner. Parker either sold extremely well or legit hurt her midsection on that strange move I mentioned. There were some excellent spots in this match, the Soul Snatcher being among the best of them. But the experience level and talents of Sol, Ren, and Jada were so notably advanced compared to Rizzo, Reese, and Gray. Kendall probably has the best shot out of that second trio because the skill is there and she clearly has ability, but none of the 3 was ready for this match. Also, pretty much all 3 of them, I'm talking about Reese, Gray, and Rizzo, they dressed exactly the same. They're women that have different shades of hair color, but none of them stand out from one another outside of the fact that we know Rizzo happens to have a character. So I just didn't agree. I understand what the gimmick of the match was. It was all people who had never challenged Roxanne Perez for the NXT Women's title before, or maybe never challenged for the title at all. But there were other women on that brand with more experience and more talent that could have been in this match, made it a better match. Again, Brynlee Reese being in particular was ridiculous. Kendall Gray also, and Rizzo. Like Izzy Dame even could have been in this, or Jasmine Nix could have been in it. Like, again, not people that I necessarily think should be, but they're more experienced and they're better in the ring than the people that were here. NXT is developmental, so it's to be expected that there's going to be mistakes and, talent that perhaps is given opportunities that they're not ready for, or they would not otherwise get on the main roster. But if the lineup was stronger, like I said, this might have been something really special on television. Solson's coming back has been dynamite. Jada and Roxy, that's going to be an extremely intriguing match because NXT protects Parker every time she doesn't win. All in all, this was a good match. We got the right winner. But again, just Jada, she should have been the first women's North American champion. And if not that, because she didn't become that, she should be the next one. She should probably be the person to beat Kalani Jordan. Wes Lee backstage put over Pete Dunne as a technician and Joe Hendry as a social media sensation, but said he's going to send them back to Raw and TNA respectively. He also said Hendry was only there for the rub of WWE. Hendry heard this live, cut a split screen promo with Lee countering that the height of Hendry's career would be the bottom of his. Hendry said it's the biggest match of his career and time to make a believer out of himself. Ethan Page backstage had no desire to speak about Hendry, saying he's not even part of the NXT roster and he's the least deserving of anyone in this number one contendership match. So right there, we knew he was going to win the match, very obvious. Dunn came up saying Page was afraid of him, and because he was a longtime NXT UK champion, if he did win the title, he would not lose it anytime soon. He promised to break Page's fingers and then his ego. All of these were solid. I just hate when backstage segments give away match results, and that's what happened here. So we had Hendry, Lee, and Dunn. This was the main event of NXT. Page sat on commentary, putting over the challengers, but pointing out he was still the champion. Hendry did a seesaw with Wes into Dunn's crotch, then a double fallaway slam that was a little bit convoluted. Dunn dropped Lee on Hendry with an X-Plex. Wes came back with a sharp tornado DDT on Pete and a frog splash on Hendry. Dunn grabbed Lee's hands on a handstand, snapping his fingers over the apron. Hendry chokeslammed Dunn, but Page exited commentary, pulling the referee out of the ring to stop the count. Hendry chest slammed Wes into the announce table. He did that in response, and then he caught Dunn with another chokeslam inside. Page prevented a new referee from getting to the ring, literally holding him back on the ramp. That allowed Dunn to hit bitter end on Hendry, but Trick Williams jumped out of the crowd, caught Pete with a trick shot. That was in the background. Hendry covered. Page was late interfering in the chaotic finish. Wes was then stumbling ringside, only for Zach Wentz to jump out of the crowd and attack him in a pull-apart brawl to end NXT. And if I didn't make it clear, when Hendry covered, of course, he got the 1-2-3 and he became number one contender. Not only was the end of the match and show super fun, but the camera work was legitimately top tier. You had Trick slide into the ring in the background from out of nowhere as we watched Page and the referee in the foreground. So we saw what was developing that Page could not. Then we similarly saw Wes stumbling around while Hendry was celebrating, only for Wentz to attack him before the camera even focused on them. It was really cool visually. Just thought it was worth mentioning that. In terms of what happened, Hendry fighting for the title was the obvious move even before the segment on Tuesday night. Just the other two had existing feuds. They didn't exactly make sense as challengers at this juncture. I did not love how easily he dispatched Dunn and Wes, though. I mean, Pete took two finishers. Wes was easily taken down. WWE has booked TNA talent extremely strong on its broadcast to this point. But here, I felt as if it was somewhat at the detriment of its own guys. I guess Hendry needed that to be legitimized for this audience as a number one contender, but it's just what was going through my mind watching it live. I'm curious to see where these other matches get booked because the No Mercy card after NXT on Tuesday already had 5 matches booked. We will discuss that at the end of this segment once we get through everything else that happened. But it's immensely notable that 3 different people entered this match going for a number one contendership. And all 3 of them had storylines develop and advance coming out of it, including both of the losers. That right there is just good booking. Chase U had a championship celebration in the ring without balloons or confetti or anything. Andre Chase pointed out it's the start of a new school year. Thea Hale said she's proud of Ridge Holland, Duke Hudson, and Riley Osborne. Both put him over as well. Fraxium interrupted, saying Chase U was the better team last week, but not every week because they're the best tag team in NXT. Holland was annoyed that they were interrupted because Chase U stood by his side when he was lost and no one else would stand by him. Fraxium basically said, nice speech, we still want a rematch. So Hudson and Osborne challenged basically to like a qualification match. They ripped off their tearaway pants saying it would happen immediately. So we got Fraxium against Hudson and Osborne. Duke hit a great jump over German suplex. Nathan Frazier did the springboard Spanish fly. Osborne then took a jump up superplex, super kick suplex spot with Axiom, and they got a squeaky clean win. Fraxium did. They stared down the champions after the bell. This was booked like there was pretty much no contest. They were head and shoulders above Hudson and Osborne, and deservingly so because they're basically the best tag team in all of WWE right now. Holland probably cut his best promo in the prior segment, and while the celebration could have used a little bit more pomp, it was overall a sensible way to build a rematch without just handing it out to someone, which is always boring. Lola Vice fought Wendy Chu. Lola sold apprehension getting into the ring with Wendy, who quickly put her in a sleeper hold, then in a tree of woe with a running dropkick. Vice came back with her hip attack before breaking another Chu sleeper with a jawbreaker. Kalani Jordan ran out and right into the ring for no reason whatsoever. Wendy ducked. Lonnie ate a back fist from Lola, and with everyone distracted, Chu knocked Vice out with her body pillow and got the win. Lonnie demanded her title back. She went after Chu in the ring, giving her a taste of her own medicine with the pillow before pulling out the women's North American title, so we knew that it was loaded the entire time. We saw Lonnie walking around backstage earlier, so the fact that she just randomly chose that moment to interfere, at least for me, was nonsensical. She could have gone after her at any point, including during her entrance. Why would you interrupt the match of someone in Lola who she was friendly with last week and was only in the match because she was kind of getting her back? She actually deserved the back fist. Also, how the hell did she know the title was in the pillow? I mean, fair enough that she could probably deduce it from the end of the match, but she was already knocked out by that point. So that just didn't work for me either. They're going to run Lonnie and Wendy at No Mercy. You guys know I've been a supporter of Chu for a couple of years now, but man, does that have TV match written all over it. I have no idea why that is being put on the No Mercy card, particularly without a stipulation of any kind to make it more interesting. Maybe they add one next week. I'll reiterate that Lonnie either needed a character before winning the title, or she needs to use this title to develop a character. And unfortunately, that still has not happened. Fallon Henley and JC Jane got a promo package where they went over the trials and tribulations of their early careers, grinding on the independent scene, trying to scrounge up money, etc. JC said that got them into NXT, where all of a sudden now they have to compete against a bunch of D1 athletes and social media sensations who neither care about wrestling nor deserve their respect. They said they're the leaders of the division, and Jasmine Nix is the only one who listens to them. We saw pictures of Henley and Jane being together in the independents before NXT. They said they're going to be leaders, examples, and the fatal influence of NXT. So there's the name. I wonder if anyone from the main roster saw how easily that came together. Name, logo, reasoning, all in one segment. It's really not that tough. I still don't like the concept of the group, but this sold it way, way better than anything to this juncture, and far better than we've seen with Pure Fusion Collective lately on Raw, just to make a direct comparison of two women's trios groups that are newly announced. Plus, I had no idea that Fallon and JC had a prior relationship, even if it was minor on the indies. So that kind of helped make sense of it all. What did stick out was Jasmine's promo. Totally unnatural, maybe 1/10 as believable as Fallon and JC. Definitely needs to be worked on. I'm sure it will be. And again, I point out when I criticize things like that, this is a developmental product, and the whole point is for her to develop. Lexis King was polishing his throne backstage as the Metaphor ladies talked about being in the WNBA and Titan games, reminding fans of their credentials, saying they were ready to reclaim their spotlight and take down Fatal Influence in a tag team match next week. King interrupted, calling them Meta 2, given Noam Dar is injured and Oro Mensah lost the biggest match of his career. He exited with a skirt, and he dropped the mic, basically. Mensah came in. He was still suffering from his loss, but he had the ladies back. It's crazy how much personality Lexis has compared to not only his time in AEW, but when he started in NXT. I'm glad also the ladies got to remind about their history because they haven't been featured as much lately, and they really should be. Dempsey cut a promo quoting Lou Thesz, basically putting over the greatness of pure wrestling. Sinclair entered his diatribe saying that she's sure he's a great person, Thesz, if Dempsey likes him. He said that NQCC would make the Heritage Cup the most prestigious title in NXT. Ren interrupted again, saying Charles would defend the cup against anyone brave enough to face him. That led to Oba Femi answering the call, and Sinclair immediately saying under her breath, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," which got a legitimate laugh out of me. Probably one of the hardest moments I've laughed on NXT television the last couple of months. Femi said the North American title is more prestigious and he's the more dominant champion, so he threatened to take the cup as well. That led D'Angelo family out as expected, with Tony D'Angelo turning his focus to Femi as the family brawled with NQCC. Oba attacked first after a brief stare down, but Tony escaped a powerbomb and planted Femi's ass into the canvas with a spinebuster, standing tall in the ring as Oba sold it at the end. Definitely the first time that Femi has been allowed to look vulnerable to that degree. We knew this match was coming based on all the backstage interactions over the last couple of weeks. It's definitely an exciting booking. With such limited build, I can't imagine Tony D beats Oba for the title, but he does actually seem like a legitimate possibility, and you can't say that about most of the people Femi has fought. Again, Ren's personality stood out. She is really helping NQCC be interesting, and she is just so naturally funny. It's great whenever she's on television. Ashanti the Adonis was bragging to three ladies backstage, saying he would take out Deion Lennox with ease, but when Lennox showed up, they quickly turned to talk to him instead, because he's too fine. Javon Evans was chilling on a road case, watching when Sinclair came up with the cup, asking him to watch it. Gallus stepped in, pointing out Joe Coffey's name on the cup, saying Evans knows nothing about proper wrestling. They suggested Javon take them out for pints so that they could teach him. He declined because he's only 20 and that's illegal. Cedric Alexander came in to get his back. They started calling him, I think Uncle Ced was the name they used. It all kind of fizzled out from there. It was a nice world-building backstage segment. We've gotten so much from Javon in the ring in such a short period of time that having this break from him has actually been nice. It seems like they're going to do a mini feud here, probably do a tag match, a singles match coming up, but it's pretty interesting. Lennox fought Adonis coming out of this. Deion straight up tossed Ashante into midair early in this match, but it was so high that he actually threw him out of frame, which was kind of crazy when you consider the strength that is required to do that. Adonis came back with a drop toe hold ringside and a tornado splash off the top rope. Lennox hit a nice spinebuster, but Adonis thumbed the eye, hung him on the top rope, and did sweet chin music, literally tuning up the band for the win. Then he kicked dirt on Lennox after the bell. Nothing really much happened here. Lennox flashed a little bit. Adonis proved he has talent. That's about it. Hank and Tank fought the Good Brothers. The faces had matching tight jorts. They were on fire from the bell, squashing the heels together whenever they could. Hank got the hot tag and was basically skipping around the ring. He was so juiced up. He had a big boot from Luke Gallows, but Tank ran him into the post outside. Hank caught Carl Anderson with a flying shoulder tackle, and the faces combined for a drive-by power slam for an absolutely massive upset victory in like 4.5 minutes. Vic Joseph sold it on commentary, so they messed up his hair and got sweat all over him celebrating. NXT security came out, but they celebrated with them instead of stopping it. Anderson and Gallows went to attack them, but obviously security are Hank's boys, so they stood between them and made sure that did not happen. I'd have a problem with this if it was not termed as a major upset, because otherwise it would have just been straight up ridiculous to put Hank and Tank over the Good Brothers, even if the latter are in the twilight of their careers. I assume they're going to get their win back in a week or two. Maybe they do a rubber match, something like that. Hank and Tank have great energy. The ceiling is higher for Hank. That's been obvious from the start. They're basically a less corny, heavy machinery, but I just can't see what they're doing right now working anywhere beyond NXT. Sean Spears backstage denied that he pressured Brooks Jensen during his tape promo last week, saying he spoke from the heart. Idris Enofe and Malik Blade confronted, calling him a vulture for taking advantage of a vulnerable Jensen. Spears called them lost and spoke about their relationship with Brindley. That led to the guys snapping and attacking him. They brawled. The camera got knocked on its side, so he watched the brawl. You had to turn your head to watch it, basically. The faces destroyed Spears to my shock and surprise. He was smiling, though, and Jensen ran over to check on him after they left. Outside of Spears still wearing the vest without a shirt underneath, which just should not be allowed. It is so disgusting. This was probably his best segment since returning to NXT. I found it interesting and unique. Enofe and Blade actually got a chance to sink their teeth into something. I always worry about them getting lost in the shuffle, particularly Enofe because he has a higher ceiling. But this is actually an interesting low-card feud, and I hope they actually get a win out of it. I doubt they will, but it would be nice if they did. So that wraps up NXT this week. Let's take a brief look at the No Mercy card as it stands. We, of course, will give you an NXT No Mercy Ultimate Preview next week in this exact spot. NXT title, Ethan Page against Joe Hendry. Just 3 months ago, this would have been an AEW wrestler against a TNA wrestler only. That's wild that they're about to fight for the NXT title on a WWE Premium Live event. Women's Championship, Roxanne Perez against Jada Parker. Men's North American Championship, Obafemi against Tony D'Angelo. Women's North American Championship, Kalani Jordan against Wendy Chu. Again, this just should not be on the card. Tag Team Championship, Chase U against Fraxium. No stipulations for any of these matches. It really feels like one of the singles matches should get something added to it just to differentiate it from the rest. Now, those are the 5 matches announced. Wesley versus Zach Wentz makes sense here. If you remember, Wes said last week he assumed they would be fighting at No Mercy, which makes me believe they will fight at No Mercy. You could also do Trick Williams and Pete Dunne. I would say that it doesn't need to be on the show if you're going to put it on the CW episode, the first one. I think Trick and Pete is probably big enough to make, I don't want to say the main event of that show, but a major match on that card and a reason for people to tune in. So I'm going to guess Wes and Zach gets added. Trick and Pete does not, but they could possibly put both on. To be determined. So that wraps up NXT this week. Definitely a successful episode of television. Did a lot for No Mercy. I don't know what happened on the taped episode. We will discuss that next week in this exact same spot. Let's go ahead and move over to AEW. Now, as mentioned earlier, I'm going to do the breakdown a little bit differently this week just due to my schedule. First, we're going to tackle Rampage and Collision based on storyline. That's what we usually do, but of course we do it with Dynamite. Then we will cover Dynamite inside and outside of the Ultimate Preview when it comes to All In. It's just easier for me to do it that way this week. In terms of Collision and Rampage, 4 of 11 matches across the weekend were storyline relevant, which on its own is 36%. Probably among the higher marks, unfortunately, for Rampage and Collision since we started keeping track of this. Potentially good enough to send AEW into a really nice number. Once we factor Dynamite in later, we will see about that in a bit. As mentioned, let's start with Collision and Rampage. On Collision, Eddie Kingston, a grizzly Eddie Kingston, spoke to Bryan Danielson through the camera from his home, saying he doesn't recognize the guy he sees on TV. He seems to not have the fire anymore. He said this version of Danielson is sure to lose to Swerve Strickland because he looks like he doesn't care or have the passion anymore. Certainly fair to say Bryan has not shown much oomph on TV, but it's also a strange angle to take with only one Dynamite left. You should do this like 3 weeks out, 4 weeks out. My expectation was Bryan would show some fire on Wednesday as a response, but it also felt like Eddie ignored the match with Jeff Jarrett where Danielson beat the shit out of him and showed plenty of fire in that individual match. On Collision, FTR fought the Acclaimed in a number 1 contendership match. Max Caster did an a cappella planned freestyle. He had a line that was pretty damn questionable, to say the least. They were also wearing all black, like basic t-shirts, taking a more serious turn as I hoped, like 4 months ago that they would. Dax Harwood put Caster in a sharpshooter. Anthony Bowens broke it up with Rough Rider before a 5-minute warning. Dax slipped on a superplex, nearly broke Bowens' neck. Luckily, they saved it because, damn, that could have been bad. There was a super choreographed breakup of Shatter Machine with Acclaimed hitting it, coming back. Then they did mic drop for a broken fall. Tony Schiavone was screaming at the top of his lungs like this was a classic match. It was okay. FTR then hit Shatter Machine for a broken fall, and like 30 seconds later, the bell rang for a time limit draw. That was completely incongruent to how AEW normally counts down time in matches, particularly given they just did this in another storyline with MJF and Will Ospreay. Now, I don't mind the fact that 2 matches one nearly went to a time limit draw and one did go to a time limit draw. That's totally fine with me. But you can't have different countdown procedures on a match-by-match basis. That does not make sense. They all brawled after the bell. As Schiavone informed us, Tony Khan already decided it's going to be a triple threat. So the number 1 contendership earned by Acclaimed was wasted. Then, despite being the still rightful number 1 contenders, they went to a draw against another team, which earned a number 1 contendership despite not getting a win. Really dumb shit. I went 3.25 stars and a B for the match. On Collision, Jack Perry beat a jobber in 75 seconds. Then he painted his face white like Darby Allin and dipped him up in a body bag with the TNT title. That was because he unveiled a new TNT title with a distressed strap, dark plating, and red paint splashed across it. It looked extremely cool. I'm glad they're bringing back the unique TNT titles. Jack actually posted a video on social media showing that he legitimately made it himself. I mean, there may have been supervision or whatever, but he at least had a hand in remaking this title himself. He melted new metal, he distressed it, he splashed paint on it. Actually an awesome decision and look across the board. My only gripe is that he debuted it on Collision 8 days out from All In, as opposed to after he won the title or after All In, presuming he retains. Otherwise, he gets to hold the new title for 1 week, which would be a waste for an unveiling like this if Darby just wins it. So I found that to be odd. On Rampage, Harley Cameron was angry. No one wished Saraya happy birthday. She stopped her from singing, then co-signed everything she said in a really annoying manner. Saraya complained about her rough year before Toni Storm interrupted, calling herself, yes, herself, a slut, a whore, and a tramp. She said Saraya is a pasty piece of shit and then gave her a title match for no reason whatsoever. That way Saraya could have a chance to get on the Wembley Stadium card. So Saraya called her a stupid slag. This was dumb as shit. Why would she put her title on the line 4 days before All In against someone who has done nothing to deserve it for no reason whatsoever? On Collision, Britt Baker beat Harley in 5 minutes. Why? Because Camille charged her after the match and easily caught a kendo stick attempt from Baker. She broke it in half over her knee and then booted Britt in the face. Then she brought her dead body in the ring for an off-the-shoulder slam before raising Mercedes Moné's arm. So Baker was just decimated by the heavy straight up. She wasn't caught blind, nothing. She tried to use a weapon, failed, and the heavy just kicked her ass. That was a really odd booking choice. It did make Camille look strong, no doubt about that, but she's not the one challenging for the title. On Collision, Mariah May looked really good in new gear, beating a jobber in 40 seconds with Storm Zero. Then Toni appeared on the big screen with a whole produced video. She said London will lay at her feet and the Thames will run red with Mariah's blood. This was the best one of these videos in months. May then attacked the jobber with a heel and just walked out. On Collision, Claudio Castagnoli beat Leo Rush in 9 minutes. It was pretty fun, but there was no reason for it happening. On Rampage, the Conglomeration beat the Outrunners and the Butcher in 9 minutes. And then also on Rampage, Nyla Rose beat Erica Lee, who apparently is with the Outrunners, in 90 seconds. She somehow didn't know she had a match, which didn't really make any sense because it was booked for the show and Nyla knew she had a match. On Collision, the ROH Tag Team Championships were on the line. Undisputed Kingdom defending against Dustin Rhodes and Sammy Guevara. This developed on Ring of Honor, so we got like 90 seconds of a narrated package to explain it. I'm glad they at least did that. Roderick Strong and the Beast Mortos interfered late, but the referee somehow blind to blatant cheating and absolute chaos all around him. The Von Erichs ran down to put them both in Iron Claws, which apparently worked even though Mortos has a huge thick mask with horns on it. Cage of Agony then attacked the Von Erichs for no clear reason I could determine. Then the Conglomeration ran down and did the same. Guevara stopped a high-risk move with an avalanche cutter, hit a swanton bomb, and Dustin, I think, got the 1-2-3 for the title change. The crowd absolutely loved this. It was chaotic as hell, and that can often overcome a poor match with dumb booking any day, especially for babyfaces in front of a crowd that is primed to buy into them. Dustin did say he was going to be greedy with gold, but I hope there's a good reason why he is now ROH Trios and Tag Team Champion simultaneously, and also a good reason why these matches are constantly on Collision now. It's like this show is now becoming a part ROH show, which if you're going to make it that, fine. I don't need to watch it every single week if that's going to be the case. If they mix it with AEW stuff, it's going to make it really difficult. I'm just a little confused about everything that they're doing here. I mean, clearly they're trying to go all in with Texas. Pun not intended, but also kind of intended. It's just a little frustrating for me. Undisputed Kingdom has now reached its lowest level of value. I didn't dislike the segment. It was entertainment and chaos. I'm just kind of curious about the booking. On Rampage, Kyle Fletcher and Roosh beat KM and Rhett Titus in 2 minutes. Don Callis later praised Roosh, who said it's time for Callis to show him respect or a major booking or something. It wasn't clear exactly what he wanted. Fletcher then apologized to Callis for not following orders and losing to MJF. Callis said he never needs to apologize to him, just focus on what's next. This I liked. Some reality, some depth to the storyline. We talked about the fact that Callis has a heel faction, yet two of the guys aren't heels. One of them now, of course, is gone in Ospreay, and Roosh was there but wasn't exactly there, so they clarified Roosh. And Fletcher is still in this like weird zone, but at least they're discussing that as a storyline as opposed to it just being something that happens in the background. On Rampage, Nick Wayne beat Kip Sabian in 8 minutes. Shayna distracted late. Luchasaurus interfered, and Nick won with Wayne's World. Christian Cage was proud watching backstage. On Rampage, Top Flight beat the MXM Collection in 14 minutes. This was the main event. Leo Rush was on commentary. Top Flight now wears thematic gear like they're pilots, like almost like they're wrestling in 1994. The entire concept of doing that in 2024 is so dumb. But even worse is that they're regular pilots and not something cool. Like, I don't know, fighter pilots, people who not only fly high in the sky, but are fast, which is more representative of their group and straight up cooler. This should not be something I need to suggest as a third party. They won with a between the legs splash, just like Grayson Waller does as a signature, as opposed to any of their awesome athletic and impressive moves. That was annoying. On Collision, Hologram beat Angelico in 8 minutes with a pinning combination. The gimmick was that he won with mat wrestling instead of high flying and is now 5-0. Yet, of course, he did high flying during the match. Cool that he's 5-0. Let's put him in a storyline or give him something beyond being a guy who can wrestle. And lastly, on Rampage, Scorpio Sky was angry. He got refused entry into Private Party's private party, but Brandon Cutler was allowed to walk in with some women. So Private Party just walked out and they saw him and they go, "Hey man, come inside." So I don't, it was weird that they made a whole deal out of him not being let in initially. All of those random, unrelated months of Scorpio Sky promos, maybe they're finally going somewhere. This doesn't seem related to the topics that he was discussing. I don't know if I need Sky managing Private Party. I mean, enough of Private Party having managers and stuff, but let's at least see where this goes. Now, shifting over to AEW Dynamite, we're going to discuss basically 2 matches, and then we're going to get to the AEW All In Ultimate Preview. Overall on Dynamite, 3 of the 4 matches were storyline relevant. That makes it 7 of 15 for the week, 47%. So even on a go-home week for the biggest show of the year, half the matches were storyline relevant. They simply need to do better. Maybe going from All In to All Out over the next 2 weeks, that'll improve. I keep saying that. I try to give hope. But again, until we can hit that 66% threshold, 2/3 of the matches in a given week being relevant to storylines and what's happening in the company, it's kind of tough. It just is. Dynamite, you'll know, was taped this week earlier in the day, Wednesday, because it was in Cardiff, Wales. So it was in the afternoon, obviously in the United States, the evening over there. And I believe they also taped Collision. Now, I'm not going to look at spoilers because we're publishing this episode before, that show airs on Saturday. So you're not going to get anything like that here. Could that potentially change some of our picks and predictions? It might, but we simply can't account for that. Otherwise, we'd be spoiling the show for you. And again, I don't know if anything actually is going to happen on that Collision that is overly relevant. So let's talk about 2 Dynamite matches that we can kind of cover before we get to your AEW All In Ultimate Preview. The first was a Continental Championship match. Kazuchika Okada defending against Claudio Castagnoli. Okada had Claudio prone late, but took a break to flip the bird to the audience. So Claudio stood up, put him in the swing for 20 revolutions. Okada caught him running with a perfect dropkick to the head. Claudio ducked Rainmaker, countered with a springboard spinning European uppercut. Okada hit a neckbreaker over the knee. Claudio ducked another Rainmaker and hit a pop-up European uppercut. We were reminded at this point that it was a 20-minute time limit, given it's a continental match, I guess. And shortly thereafter, seconds later, time expired with nary a countdown for a time limit draw. Now, I didn't hear a countdown. It's possible I missed it or it happened during commercial break, so benefit of that. But to the best of my knowledge, that's 3 different time limit draws in the last, 2 months, 3 months, all of them handled slightly differently. That is frustrating. The Young Bucks came out asking if the fans wanted another 5 minutes, but of course, they stuck to the contract and the rules and disallowed it because they're heels. So they told Claudio to leave because they had a match or else they'd physically remove him. He put his mouth guard back in to fight, but the other babyface entered and that match just started and Claudio kind of fought Okada to the back. Maybe they have another match. That would make sense since it was a draw, but they didn't say as much on Wednesday. I left this wondering if all Continental title matches have had 20-minute limits or if that was just convenient here. I remember that being the rule in the Continental Classic, but I did not know that carried over to the title matches once the tournament was over. That could just be me forgetting it. Could be the fact that the title's so rarely defended these days that it was out of my mind. That should be one of multiple differentiators for the Continental title that would allow it to stand out in the grander scheme of AEW. Because right now there's 4 men's singles titles, and there's 3 of them that are in the mid-card. So how can this one be slightly different? Sort of like the ROH Pure title, but less boring when it comes to the differentiation of rules. I find the rules for the Pure title relatively boring. Anyway, the match was slow. It did pick up late, 3.75 stars B+. People will overrate this because it's Okada and Claudio, but if you actually watched it and you kind of ignore just the audience popping because it's Claudio and Okada in front of them, not that much actually happened in the ring here. On Dynamite also, Darby Allin and FTR fought the Elite. Wheeler avoided an EVP trigger. The Bucks banged their knees together. Then the faces did stereo sharpshooters. Well, one of them was a Scorpion Deathlock because Sting. Darby hit his flip over cutter, so Jack Perry caught him with a Scorpion Death drop. Then Darby dodged a knee and Jack ate Shatter Machine. Matt Jackson took a superplex splash and Darby added a coffin drop for the babyface win on the go-home show. The action here was far more consistent than the prior match that we just discussed, but there were no real high points for it. All in all, a sensible go-home match, just combining 2 feuds into one. Acclaimed came out after the bell, calling the Bucks and FTR both great teams before pointing out neither of them could beat the Acclaimed in matches over the last 2 weeks. Then Billy Gunn did 2-word suck it, which I thought Bang Bang Gang took for we've got 2 words for you, guns up. I mean, I don't know why they're literally just stealing the D-Generation X gimmick just because Billy happens to be in AEW. I know he's done it before, but I thought they passed it over to Bang Bang Gang, at least again. That was what I remembered. With those matches now covered, allow me finally to welcome in Vintage Chris Vanini for our AEW All In Ultimate Preview. Chris, it has been a while since you've been on one of these AEW shows. I know your crazy college football schedule has prevented you, at least it did, in prior months from watching as much AEW as you perhaps used to. But I feel like you're all caught up and you're ready to knock this out of the park with me.
Yeah, man, I'm excited about this show. I don't think I've been on the AEW show since the last pay-per-view, but
well, a few pay-per-views, I think.
Yeah, I'm fired up for this All In. I'm fired up for next year's All In, which will be in my backyard.
You get to
here
go
in Texas. So yeah, I think it's a loaded card, and I think overall they've done a really good job building this, and so it's yeah, I'm excited to get into it.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm excited about, and I know that I'm going to say this, and it will change before Sunday's show starts. I guarantee it. But right now, there's only 10 matches on the card, and I am thrilled about that. There's 1 match on 0 Hour. There's 9 on the main card. I know it's going to change. They'll probably add 3 matches to 0 Hour. Hopefully, fingers crossed, no more to the main card. If I can get a 9-match main card for All In, I'm going to be absolutely thrilled with that. But let's go ahead. We'll start with the 0 Hour match. We'll work our way down the card to the main event. This, of course, is the order of importance that the Silver King believes the matches should fall in, because guess whose show it is?
This is my show. My show.
So we're going to start with Willow Nightingale and Tomohiro Ishii against Chris Statlander and Stokely Hathaway, 0 Hour. On Collision, Stat cut a confident promo with Stoke understandably scared. He showed false confidence. He was actually amazing here, very funny. There is a stipulation added that the winner here gets to choose the stipulation for their singles match. I believe it's going to be for the CMLL women's title at All Out. And that plays for me. You know, this didn't really make a lot of sense to put it on the card. They wanted Willow and Stat on it. That's fine. But, you know, Ishii coming in randomly and then Stokely wrestling and thinking that's even, obviously it's not. So that was a little odd, but there'll be comedy elements. It'll probably be a fun time. And ultimately, because one side has 2 wrestlers and the other doesn't, it really just has 1. I have to believe Willow and Ishii will wind up winning, and Willow will pick the stipulation for their match at All Out.
Yeah, this feels like the perfect kind of like kickoff show match. You know, like it's fun. There are some stakes, and it's an interesting just dynamic of people. Statlander versus Willow is obviously the bigger match. You get to that at All Out. You do something fun in between. I kind of feel like, you know, like when it comes to pick the stipulation matches, it's usually the heels
it is
who do that. So does Stokely cheat in some way, or does he just completely get walloped? I
I
guess
mean,
I probably can't see
you may
Will.
not know, this dude's name is Stone Pitbull, and he is every bit a Stone Pitbull. So, like,
I know.
it's possible they could win and they enlist a dude to help them and neutralize Ishii and somehow Stat beats Willow. Like, that could definitely happen. I'm just looking at it in terms of, like, if the match goes as it's supposed to go, you know.
Right, but I like you could totally see them having Stokely pin Ishii and making that like the crowning moment of his career, and he'll just talk about that forever or something like that. I'm gonna pick I'm talking myself into picking the Heels here. I think it'll be fun.
Fair enough. I do like, by the way, that they saved Willow and Stat for All Out. You know, they want to put every match on their biggest show, obviously, but when you do another show 2 weeks later, you have to have some marquee matches. And there has been really 4, I should say, women's feuds ongoing in AEW over the last few months, and they deserve credit for actually having 4 women's feuds at the same time, which was a first in the history of the company, the 5-year history of the company. One of them ended on TV, which was totally fine. 2 of them are on All In, and the third one being on All Out makes all the sense in the world. So I like that they saved it. I'm okay with the fact that they got on the card here. I wish the match story to get this mixed tag team match was a little stronger, but nevertheless, it's just a kickoff show match, and it should be pretty solid. Before we get to the main card, I did forget to explain for any first-time listeners what this ultimate preview is. I feel like you deserve that. We're going to break down every single match on the card. We're going to tell you what happened if we didn't already cover it on today's show in go-home moments across pretty much Collision and Dynamite, mostly Dynamite, and then we will offer our predictions for the match, and we will discuss what we believe might happen in storylines coming out of the show. So I just wanted to set that ground rule for all of you so you understood what we are doing here. Now we can go ahead and move on to the main card. FTW Championship on the line. Chris Jericho defending against Hook. On Collision, Jericho cut a promo on Hook suggesting he might blind his other eye too. We found out he would be fighting Tommy Billington, really for no reason whatsoever. He said he knew Billington's dad and Tommy wasn't trained properly while he was trained by Stu Hart. Jericho made it make sense, even if it was just AEW putting a British wrestler they just signed on television. So on Dynamite, we got Jericho against Billington. In a pre-match interview, Jericho called it Wales, England, which did get some great heat. Yeah. Then he suggested Billington hasn't earned the nickname Dynamite Kid because it's just his uncle and he hasn't done anything impressive yet. The neophyte had Union Jack tights on. Jericho caught him flying with a code breaker, got the win. Then he repeated the England flub until Hook stormed down for a face-to-face. Big Bill attacked for a chokeslam. The iPad fell off. This was stuff that happened. I truly don't have any take on it other than this was Billington's worst match in AEW to date and an overall boring segment to put second on the go-home Dynamite for your biggest show of the year.
I mean, I thought it all made sense. You go to England and you fight the relative of one of the more famous English wrestlers ever, and because he's about to fight the son of Taz. You know, I will say, I know people have been very mixed on Jericho for a while now. I haven't watched it a ton, but I like the learning tree gimmick. I like the entrance to his music when he says I'm the learning tree. I love the goofy, stupid smiles he's having in promos. And I like that he's just like beating the sons of all these people he knows or used to wrestle or stuff like that. It's kind of like a different twist on the Christian gimmick, but he's fighting the sons of all the fathers. I thought this was fine. You know, it's low on the card. I was entertained.
Technically, just so everyone knows, Billington is the nephew of the Dynamite Kid. Yeah. It's fine. I think you are benefiting from not having seen it every single week. I was actually very positive about the learning tree when it first started and the Jericho Vortex. I thought it was cool that he was taking something he was criticized for and turning it on its head. But the longer it droned on, kind of the worse it got and the more frustrating it got. And not in a way that's like, oh, they do this on purpose because they want heat. It's very much go away heat. And he just doesn't seem to understand that it's not that I want Jericho off my television. He's probably one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. It just has to be in moderation, and there's no moderation when it comes to it. It's every week, and it's the same thing every single time. And that's what's frustrating me and I think a lot of other people. Now, the stipulation...
That's very AEW
it is.
To do. Just kind of drive a gimmick into the ground.
It is. So the stipulation here is that Hook cannot challenge for the FTW title again and must leave the Jericho Vortex if he loses. Those are hardly punitive stipulations, and in theory, fully separating him from the FTW title would actually be a great idea so the kid can no longer be saddled by it for the remainder of his career. But Jericho has had a 4-month reign with this strap. The gimmick of being for the world champion, it has gotten old, and I gotta imagine Hook wins it back here. Otherwise, there's literally been 0 point to this feud. And really, even if Hook does win, it's not like he has gotten more over or improved his game working with Jericho, which is what we believed the reason for this was, so that he could cut more promos and get better on the mic and build a character. He's barely spoken. He hasn't really helped run the storyline. It's been Jericho kind of carrying 90% of this on his shoulders. And the promo stuff and the storytelling has been the weak part of Hook's game. So I do have Hook winning the title back. It just makes the most sense. Jericho doesn't need it to continue being the learning tree. That's where I stand.
Well, and also the purpose of the learning tree gimmick is ultimately to have one of these younger people beat him, you know? So I'm picking Hook as well. But I got to say, the potential in Hook that we all saw when he debuted and when he started and all that hype he had and Action Bronson and everything, he hasn't got, he's still that.
Yep.
You know, like he just hasn't grown as a character, as a wrestler. And it's been like years. I remember when he debuted and everything and how hot he was at the beginning. And it just, he's not been put in positions to grow. And even under the learning tree here, you would have thought we could have gotten some more promos and stuff like that to kind of grow. And I don't know. I don't know if Hook's it or not, but I do think he wins.
There is perhaps no one in AEW who could benefit more from being in a legitimate developmental system. And I don't necessarily mean WWE. It could be New Japan. It could be working TNA or being featured heavily as the main event in Ring of Honor and cutting promos every single week, whatever the case. There is probably no one who could potentially benefit more from that in AEW than Hook, but he's never been developed. He's just the same person that he was, slightly more fluid in the ring, added 5% more character, but that was only when he worked with Samoa Joe, who himself has character to spare. So he almost lent some to Hook. With Joe gone, it's completely disappeared again. It's unfortunate. Let's go ahead and move to the Casino Gauntlet. The winner will receive a future AEW championship match. On Dynamite, Hangman Page was exiting the building because of something he did backstage that was not specified nor shown, but he stopped to announce that he's going to be in the Gauntlet match. He also said anyone standing in his way of the world title would get run over. Evil Uno walked by, and when Page learned he was also in the match, he hit him with a chair. Strong from Page, kind of an awkward concept to create a backstage incident and not explain it nor show it. I did laugh, though, when he ran over Uno with his rolling suitcase. I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah. Page is in a weird spot because, like, he's been doing great work, but it kind of has to come at the expense of elevating Swerve and all these other things. And do you have him win and just get back into a title picture again? He's still talking about Swerve a lot. Or do we need him to go off and do something else for a bit as this crazy character, which I like? I think he's doing a good job. Do we just have him kind of take it out in some other feud or some other people before he kind of circles back? But I thought that was it was good to get him on the show. Good bit backstage. He hit an old friend with the chair, just kind of highlights how dastardly he is. Weird, like you said, weird to not show what happened otherwise, but other than that, I thought it worked.
Like, they didn't need him leaving the arena. They could have just said he was backstage and done that exact same segment. You know?
Yeah, but I think, I mean, you could have just said he was just leaving because he wanted to leave. It could have been any reason.
Right, like he had nothing else to do, so he was getting out. They created an incident, but like there was no purpose to doing that, you know?
It did give, but it did give us a reason to have the suitcase roll over Evil and all.
It did, but he could have carried that anyway. But yes, I guess technically it did. We now don't know all the entrants, of course, for this Casino Gauntlet, though we also do know Orange Cassidy is in the first spot, and Mark Briscoe and Kyle O'Reilly are among those in it. There are supposedly multiple surprises in store. One of them is definitely Michael Oku, a really talented British wrestler who had arguably the match of the year with Will Ospreay, I think back in January, and may be signing with AEW soon. The other expectation is obviously the debut of Ricochet, and it might be fair to call him the favorite if he does enter the match. I do wonder whether there are any returns like a Powerhouse Hobbs or a Wardlow. Hobbs had a knee injury. I'm not sure whether it was serious, like an ACL. It seemed like it was. But if it wasn't, and it was something with a 3 or 4 month recovery, theoretically, he could be back. I have no idea whatsoever what is happening with Wardlow. Jay White is someone else who could come back here. Apparently, he has been cleared. Hangman Page, we know he's in the match. He's the person that was put front and center in the match on Dynamite. It would make a lot of sense for him to be the one to take the title off of Danielson, reigniting a feud with Swerve on the back end. Overall, I really enjoy this match style. I don't love the idea that the winner at the time the match ends will be the third number one contender for the world title. The first being Danielson, the second already being Darby Allin, and the third being the winner of this match. That to me is immensely frustrating. All of that said, look, putting Hangman front and center, it could be a swerve, pun not intended there, where I did not intend it, where someone else comes in, wins the match, Hangman feuds with them, then Hangman a couple months from now goes after Swerve, goes after Danielson, whatever the case might be. Ultimately, though, I think it's telegraphed for a reason, and I think he's probably the right person to win it. So I have Hangman taking the Casino Gauntlet, becoming the third number one contender for the AEW World title.
It's interesting where like AEW is in a spot where you could have a lot of people you feel could be on the world championship picture level. Yeah, several people in this match. Whether or not we get a title change in the main event, the loser of the Ospreay MJF match potentially. Does Jericho drop the title and go back into the world title picture? Like, I don't know where it's going to go. Plus, Darby Allin's got a shot in there as well. So, like, it does make it interesting in that it does feel like AEW's in a spot where they finally have elevated a lot of people who feel like that could be in that. And I say that because I think, at what point does Orange Cassidy get into the world title picture?
Never.
Not saying he's going to win it. But
I think he's challenged for it before. Has he? I think so.
But like a full on story. I mean, was he part of that 4-way, the 4 pillars bit?
No, he wasn't part of that. I don't think he's ever had a full on story for it. I do believe he's had a title match, but if you keep talking, I will Google it and check it for you.
But the problem is him and Darby Allin are kind of very similar. And if you already have Darby Allin's in the picture, maybe you don't throw Orange Cassidy in there as well. I guess I'll go with Hangman as well. Because like you said, it does make the most sense. But I would love for Hangman to get into a feud with somebody else in this and do that for a minute. Maybe even Orange Cassidy. Orange Cassidy, Hangman could be a really good feud. Just two completely different styles of personality. So, but I guess I'll pick Hangman too. It does feel pretty telegraphed.
He did have a triple threat, and I knew this. It was in the back of my mind, but he had a triple threat with Kenny Omega and Pac back in 2021, which was a very good match. It was a double or nothing that year. I remember that. I don't think he's ever had a one-on-one match, but I mean, even just searching this on Cage Match, which by the way, for the ratings and all that, ignore it. But for a database, it's fantastic.
Yeah. It's great.
This guy has had so many title matches, both defenses and opportunities and number one contenderships. It is absolutely wild. But okay, I'm going Hangman. You're going Hangman. We are on the same page there. Let's move to the Trios Championships. The Patriarchy defending against House of Black, Bang Bang Gang, and a wild card team in a London ladders match. And you may say, Silver King, how the hell did we get to this? Well, I'm about to tell you. On Collision, the challenging teams reiterated the storyline in a couple promos. Christopher Daniels was backstage in a terrible shirt and tie combo, by the way. He announced this match with the fourth team being determined on the go-home Collision. He didn't say this was Tony Khan's decision, nor why he was putting a fourth team that had not been involved in this feud whatsoever into the match. I can only presume the last team was going to go one of two directions, one being Pac and partners, because Death Triangle was originally planned to challenge for the titles and win them on the show. The other being a reformed Hurt Business of some sort in AEW, just because they're free agents and because a wildcard team would pop and possibly get more people to buy the show. The latter, you would expect to debut if they do sign with AEW, either at All In on the show itself or on Dynamite. So I figured it probably wasn't them. And then on Dynamite, we learned the wildcard teams are Top Flight and Leo Rush against Pac, Claudio, and Wheeler Yuta. So the latter is going to get into the match, okay? They're not putting Top Flight and Leo Rush in here. I simply cannot see them winning. Also, it's strange that Flight isn't teaming with Action Andretti, who's their actual partner, instead of Leo Rush, who's a guy who's trying to get back in their good graces, but they haven't been all in with him yet. At least I don't think. But even if they have, again, Andretti has been their tighter partner. So I'm going to throw in, and maybe you'll disagree, Pac, Claudio, and Wheeler into this match. And I'm just at a point here where my frustration with this storyline has been overloaded. Okay. We talked about stripping the titles from Bang Bang Gang just because Jay White was gone, and then giving them a match for the vacant titles immediately after with Juice Robinson, just saying, hey, you know what? Freebird rule, F you. We're not even going to do that. They could have had them lose the titles to Patriarchy straight up. Instead, they did what they did. You have House of Black. They wrote off Buddy Matthews so he could go get married, I think, to Rhea Ripley. And then obviously he came back. They're feuding here. But they haven't gotten that much screen time or mic time. And then the wildcard team, you could say, well, they plan to give the titles to Pac and Death Triangle, so why don't they just give them to Pac, Claudio, and Wheeler Yuta? Well, because they're a random-ass team, and they're not in a faction together, so I just don't see them winning. I'm going to go with House of Black. I believe I had said that was going to be my prediction a while back. Patriarchy with the titles, could they continue holding them? Sure. But if you're putting all of these trios already in this match, and they beat all of them, then who exactly is left? So House of Black is my pick. I have no idea what's going to happen here. I think the match will be great because it's a ladder match. Brody King will do some crazy shit. Juice Robinson will do some crazy shit. Maybe Christian does also. Pac will jump off something. There you go.
The trios whole thing, gotta say it's been quite a disappointment since they introduced the belts. I think it's an example of something where it's a division that feels cool in theory, but it also came at a time when the tag team division was very much watered down, and that impacted the trios. And then you had 2 trios championships in there for no reason. It was a complete cluster.
Oh, they separated them out, by the way, so they still exist now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like it was just the Ring of Honor stuff is a whole.
I know.
Get it out of here. And so it's like, Pac and Blackpool Combat are not winning this. Everybody else has already won the belts. So it's not like there's a group where you're like, oh, this is their time, in which case I think I'm going to go with the Patriarchy holding on just because it's something. It's been interesting still as much as anything else. And, maybe another trio comes along that's better, that feels better to eventually take the titles. I don't think anybody else gains anything by winning them.
Yeah, as the trios division gained steam, the tag team division just got completely decimated. I mean, it is crazy. And we're going to talk about the tag team title match next, that it's like the same 3 teams that have been around these titles for the last 2 years are challenging for them again at All In. Mm-hmm. So trios, yes. If Patriarchy retained, I would not be angry at that. Really, as long as either one of those 2 teams, House of Black or Patriarchy, walks out with the titles, Silver King will be happy. I'd be fine with Patriarchy winning. The better booking for me is House of Black winning, walking out, and finally Luchasaurus turns on Christian, gets a massive pop in Wembley Stadium, and they kind of just move on from it in its entirety. But we will see what happens on Sunday. Tag Team Championship, Young Bucks defending against FTR and the Acclaimed in a triple threat match. Now, we already told you what happened on Dynamite, so let's go ahead and talk about this match. Yes, FTR or Acclaimed winning would generate a babyface pop on a big show. And yes, the Young Bucks have been terrible in this title run, not only because the gimmick sucks, but because they haven't even defended the titles on TV. I think they've done it now 1 time. But I cannot see FTR or Acclaimed winning the titles as helping the division or making storyline sense, when really all the Elite have going for them right now is that they hold the titles. They claim to be EVPs and have all this power, yet they can be overruled. And they stop booking shows, except when they decide they want to book shows. And Tony Khan can overrule them or agree with them whenever he wants. The whole thing has lost its track. It's off track, and it's just shit. That's the truth. If you take the titles from them, they literally have nothing left. So for me, there's a real easy FTR Acclaimed feud that can come out of this, especially if AEW is willing to turn Acclaimed heel as they should be, which could completely revitalize them. They are probably the person or team in AEW right now most in need of a gimmick change or shift. So I'm going to take the Bucks retaining because it's the only thing you can really do with their characters. And hopefully coming out of this, Acclaim turn heel, they feud with FTR. That gets interesting, and you find some other tag teams that can come in and revitalize this division, because right now it is probably at the bottom of the entire history of AEW.
Not to mention, a year ago at All In, FTR beat the Young Bucks, so
right.
Probably don't want to run that 2 years in a row. The Acclaimed are in an interesting spot where it feels like Caster's promos have been getting kind of heelish. He's been punching down and getting very personal in different kinds of ways. I agree. It does feel like a heel turn would be a good thing for them. Maybe they lose here and they kick out Billy Gunn or something like that.
That'd be great too. I'd love that. Yeah,
that'd be a good way to do that. So I'm going to go Young Bucks retain as well.
All right, let's move to the TNT Championship. Coming out of this, Jack Perry defending against Darby Allin in a coffin match. On one hand, it being a coffin match makes me lean Darby. On the other, Jack debuting the new title 8 days before All In makes me think it would be completely worthless if they're just going to have him drop it right away. Then, back on that first hand, Darby has 2 number 1 contenderships consecutively. And I'm not sure it would make sense for him to lose both of them, because then what does he do? Granted, there would still be 2 more men's singles titles that he could try to obtain. But again, he has 2 number 1 contenderships. And if he goes 0 for 2, I mean, what do? Bring Sting back for a pep talk? Like, I don't know what they do. So I'm completely unsure about the booking here, not only because it's not that well done, but because it's become so convoluted. Does Jack actually gain heat if he beats Darby? Does Allin winning back the TNT title kill Jack's momentum? Does winning back the TNT title help Darby when he's already held it, I know, twice? It's possible 3 times already. I forget. Like I said, this is a really tough prediction. I have to believe the numbers game somehow plays into the favor of the Elite. Maybe the tag team matches earlier in the show and the Bucks and or Okada help Jack, and Darby just doesn't really have anyone that has his back. But, Darby has gotten up on Jack every single time. He lit him on fire. He beat them in blood and guts by threatening to basically kill Jack in that match. That's how he got this opportunity. So
didn't Jack drive the car into Darby?
He did, but that was just like part of, a thing that they were doing. It obviously didn't kill him. So, it's been Darby getting the upper hand every single time, yet Jack is the one, and again, the Elite is a group that doesn't have anything else except their championships. I do expect there to be a number of significant title changes on this show. I just don't think this is going to be one of them. So I have Perry retaining the TNT Championship.
Yeah, I think Perry's got to hold on for all those reasons that you said.
Also, by the way, 1 year from Real Glass, Crimea River,
literally what I was about to say.
My bad.
What are we putting the odds on that Perry's going to do that again?
The odds of that happening are minus 500. Yeah. 1 to 5.
Meaning for people who are unfamiliar,
yes.
That means it's a favored to happen.
Meaning you would have to bet $500 to win $100.
Yes. Do they pull out a limo again and do a car drop? Darby would 100% be willing to go through Real Glass or something like that. So it's going to be weird, but that's going to happen. I think Jack Perry's been doing a pretty good job in this role since coming back. It's the most interested I've been in a while in him. I think the Young Bucks perhaps interfere. He retains. Darby, look, big picture with Darby, I don't know. I've never been a Darby guy. I said I could see Orange Cassidy in a world title picture. I don't see that with Darby, even though I think he has been around there. He hasn't felt like a top guy to me. Another guy who has not evolved as a character since he first debuted.
Right.
Really, like 5-6 years now into this company.
He also spent that entire time stuck with Sting. Not stuck. I mean, they were great together, but
Yeah, and yeah, they were great, but I don't think he ultimately was elevated all that much of it. He didn't pull anything out of that. So like, I don't know. I like Jack compare that to Jack Perry, who was Jungle Boy for a long time, then Jungle Jack Perry, then the whole Punk thing happens, and now he comes back and he's this. Like, he's so clearly grown as a wrestler and as a character, and I like what he's doing right now. I think he retains.
All right. Let's move to the TBS Championship. Mercedes Moné defending against Britt Baker. On Dynamite, there was a contract signing. This opened the show. They signed the contract. Mercedes said the fans are losers like Britt, who got a degree to fall back on. So Moné is more all in because she only cares about wrestling. Baker said she didn't have a plan B. She had 2 plan A's, and she's one of one, unlike Mercedes, who was one of 4. WWE reference got 0 reaction. But she got an AEW chant going saying she's the foundation of the company. Britt said Mercedes cared more about getting paid than her legacy, which kind of insinuates that she compromised by going to AEW. I didn't really understand what she meant by that. Then Britt said, hey, I could fight you, but the rules say I can't, so I'm going to fight her. And she literally bopped Camille in the head with the microphone like a tap. She then sat on Moné, Camille did, and Baker did a light splash onto both of them. They fell through the chair, and that ended it. I have 0 doubt that this all sounded great on paper, but it was not great in execution, which is pretty standard fare for Mercedes. It was just all over the place. It hardly raised the rent for the match. It was just slow and ponderous.
So I like the idea of what they were going for. I thought like the nuts and bolts of the promo were pretty good. It was Britt saying, hey, you once inspired me to get into wrestling, but you've lost your way. You only care about the money now. Yada, yada, yada. It's like, that's a good story that you're telling in this promo. It just kind of was a bit clunky on both sides. Camille, I kind of feel like she's stealing a lot of attention away because she looks like $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
She looks like a star, and she's towering over both of these women. And I thought that was a great get for AEW because she was really good in NWA. But ever since she's kind of committed to this, I'm like, kind of want to see Camille more. So that's credit to her. Also, haven't been on this show in a while to say this. Still true. CEO may be the worst entrance theme in the history of professional wrestling.
It's really bad.
It's unreal.
Yeah.
And like, I did like the idea that, hey, they can't make contact with each other. So she splashes Camille onto Mercedes. Like, again, I got the context of it all. The execution just wasn't there, but I appreciated the effort.
By the way, she did throw the contract in Mercedes' face. So she threw an object at her, which, I mean, technically kind of breaks what they were saying. If she can bop Camille in the head with a microphone and throw a contract at Mercedes, those are pretty similar. But the only thing that bothered me about that, and I don't mind the idea, I actually like the idea, that AEW says, hey, on the go-home show, you guys can't touch. It's a rule, you get fined, like real sports, right? We don't want to give away the pay-per-view match for free on television. I love that, actually. The problem is they made it a huge part of 2 different segments in the same show. And they really paid it off in another segment that we're going to talk about next. They didn't need to do it here. It just, I don't know.
I thought it was fine here, and I didn't like it the second time they did it. But then,
I didn't love it. Yeah, I didn't love it the other time either. But it was more of a featured part of it, is what I was trying to say. Mm-hmm. On Collision, Camille beat the ever-loving shit out of Baker. That is all the reason that she needed to go after her in this segment. It didn't need to be because she couldn't touch Mercedes. It should have been because she wanted to beat the shit out of Camille for kicking her ass a couple days ago. So that's really the issue I had with it. Now, look, my long expected booking for this match was Camille saving Moné, who retains the title. But given Camille was debuted before the match, like 2 months before the match, I believe that was a mistake. I think she should have been saved to show up at All In to save Mercedes and keep the title with her. That alone, though, now, because she's already debuted, would be a quite lackluster finish. The Jamie Hayter factor needs to be considered because she's British and she could potentially return here to even the sides and help Baker. But the other better option would be Hayter returning, Baker thinking she's there to help her, only for it to be a full heel turn. She helps Moné, or maybe she doesn't directly help her, but she just attacks Britt. Ultimately, I'm not sure a title reign of less than 3 months makes sense for Mercedes when you've waited this long to bring her into the company, and then you had to wait even longer for her to actually win the title because she wasn't healthy when you thought she was going to be. So I'm going to go with her retaining, and I'm going to just add the additional, I guess that's repetitive, but the extra prediction of Jamie Hayter returning, helping somehow, and being a heel.
I really like the Jamie Hayter returning bit. I don't know which way it'll go. I could see her showing up and evening the numbers and Britt wins. I like that, but like Britt doesn't need to win. The only reason I would have Britt win the title here is to then drop it to Jamie Hayter if she's coming back. That's always the story they've needed to do that they haven't done. But overall, you're right. It hasn't been that long of a win for Mercedes, a run for Mercedes. She is still your biggest women's star. If she doesn't have a title, what is she doing?
Right. Well, she does have the NJPW title, but yes, she wouldn't have the AEW title.
Does not count in my headcanon.
Don't blame me.
And I guess technically she'd still be the CEO, and I don't know what kind of power comes with that. I think Mercedes retains here. I do like the idea of a Jamie Hayter thing quickly taking Britt in another direction, so we'll see.
Yeah, someone else can bubble up for Mercedes, and Britt and Jamie could go build their storyline, which is a big storyline. And, people want to see that. They've wanted to see it for pretty much 18 months. Let's move to the International American Championship. MJF defending against Will Ospreay. On Collision, a package aired for the Tiger Driver 91, explaining that it's dangerous. Footage of Ospreay legitimately dropping Kenny Omega on his head in a botch was shown. And then they showed more footage of him doing it 100% safely to Danielson. Yet Danielson is the one who sold an injury from it. Ospreay then walked out of the interview because he was angry over being asked about it. So they're beating us over the head with this. I mean, doing an entire package for a singular move is wild. And as I've said before, if Ospreay is so against it, then it makes no sense why he keeps considering it as a babyface and keeps setting up for it as a babyface, only to take himself out of matches when he decides not to execute it. So
real quick. I just want to jump on the Tiger Drive thing before you.
I've spent so much time talking about it, so please, go ahead.
I know you have.
Yeah.
Like the concept of a move being part of a wrestling storyline is always stupid. The only time it works is when the heel somehow convinces the powers that the babyface can't use a certain move.
Right. If it was banned.
Kevin Nash couldn't do the jackknife powerbomb or something like that back in the day. Like that's the only way it works. Also, you can't do that move because it's dangerous. Dude, you're fighting.
Right.
Like you are fighting each other. The whole concept of pro wrestling is that it's supposed to be dangerous. And it goes into a larger issue I have, which we'll get into the promo, but like the whole concept of like, oh, I don't want to do this move because it's dangerous. Like everything's dangerous. Technically, like it's really, really, really like, I don't want to say fourth wall breaking, but it really takes me out of believing in pro wrestling when we do stuff like this.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. All right, let's move to Dynamite. Ospreay got a huge reaction as expected to open hour 2. MJF entered before he could even speak, wearing a full American flag suit. Will made a bunch of UK references and had the crowd on the palm of his hand. MJF said a bunch of nothing. Ospreay then got an AEW chant going because this company puts wrestling first, and he hated watching MJF steer the company away from that with a focus last year on two friends jerking each other off at Wembley Stadium. His words. Ospreay then had a great line saying Tony Khan has 3,000 people signed in the locker room, yet he had to call Ospreay because he couldn't rely on MJF to put on a good match. Obviously false. MJF is a stellar wrestler. Ospreay said AEW is supposed to be the alternative for fans, and he wants to restore the International Championship and restore the feeling in AEW. I'm surprised I'm able to read my notes here. My eyes rolled so many times during that company man promo that I thought I was going to go blind. MJF said what Americans do best is win, and nobody knows Ospreay, but everyone knows him because all of the critics and legends and active wrestlers agree that he's the best, while only dumb fans feel that way about Ospreay. MJF then brought up the Tiger Driver, saying Will's not man enough to use it. And while Ospreay thinks he's the feeling, MJF is the facts. Ospreay said feelings are remembered more than facts. That is completely not true. Literal history is facts. Then he reiterated that fans all over the world say he's better. And while it took them 4 years to love MJF, it took them 4 beats of his entrance music to love him. MJF snapped at that and then praised Ospreay for being a stepfather, but said the next kid his wife has won't be Ospreay's either. Best line of the entire segment. Ospreay then turned around and said, hey, Tony Schiavone, can you talk to Tony Khan in your earpiece and find out for me what the price of a fine would be if I punch MJF in the face? And Schiavone stood up and said, it's 100,000 pounds. I'll convert that for all of you, 127,000 US dollars. So Ospreay shrugged and he hit MJF. Then a dozen security stopped him. MJF took advantage of that by punching him with, yes, the Dynamite Diamond Ring again. So Ospreay bladed and MJF hit the Brainbuster to end it, counting his own 1, 2, 3. Then he set him up for a Tiger Driver, but security stopped him, backing him into the corner. Ospreay was bloodied backstage when Bryan Danielson came up to him and said, do it. Twice, kind of like he was Ben Stiller, presumably referring to the Tiger Driver, meaning use the move. He probably should have made that a little bit more clear, but those of us, of course, who watch every week knew what he was talking about. This was a total mixed bag for me, Chris. It simultaneously had everything I hate about AEW promos, but along with some positives. The over-reliance on propping up AEW as a real wrestling show, the focus on which one of them is rated higher for their false fighting, all of that bullshit, it was just a constant eye roll to me. That said, I loved Ospreay's passion, just the content wasn't there. MJF, I've been criticizing him for all of his promos being identical and repetitive, him just screaming into a mic and such. So the positive here is he did something completely different. He was much more reserved and biting, but the problem is, again, the content was lacking. Facts versus feelings, a bunch of whatever. You're not going to get me excited over that. The stepdad stuff was great. It would have been better if Ospreay just slugged him and then was fined backstage after the fact saying, oh, 100 grand, that's a pittance. Who gives a shit? It was worth it, right? It took the wind out of the sails of the segment because he turned around to Tony Schiavone and waited 45 seconds to get an answer before he decided to punch this guy in the head. All in all, I'd call it a successful go-home segment. It kept the heat on the match. There just wasn't that much meat on the bone as far as I was concerned. At the same time, it probably didn't need that much because the crowd is white hot for Will Ospreay.
Yeah, I thought it was a success overall. I think it went on too long.
That's also
because
true.
they also just kind of went into different things. I say this all the time, but I hated Ospreay's side kind of starting with talking about putting on a good match and catering to the fans. Like, I hate that stuff. And I'm really glad MJF came back and said, the point of this is winning. And that's what I do. Yes, that is the point of all of this. That is what I don't like. I freaking hate when pro wrestlers present pro wrestling to the fans as if it's a play, as if they're acting, as if they're trying to put on a good performance. No, I want to be sucked in and feel like you guys are actually fighting and that it means something to win. That's what you get invested in. So that was a rough start. Ospreay calling himself the Feeling. That to me 100% felt like his version of Triple H calling himself the Game. like it maybe because I listened to that promo recently, but the way he set it up, it felt very similar. The facts versus feeling stuff was kind of dumb. I hate the phrase anyway, but I kind of do side with the feeling side of it in terms of pro wrestling. You remember moments. You don't remember John Cena's 15 title defenses.
Yeah, but moments don't go in the history book, though. I mean, you're right. We as people, we as humans remember the feelings that we have when we watch these things. But what MJF's point is, what's actually memorable, the stuff that people will talk about years from now, are not necessarily the feelings. It's MJF beat Will Ospreay. Like, that's the fact. Yeah. You know?
I think
the fact that we're having this argument, though, is proof that maybe facts versus feelings was dumb the way it was shared, but it's actually an interesting argument for us to have, not so much them to have in the ring. That's the problem.
Yeah. So, and we mentioned before, when they started out by saying they couldn't have physicality between these two, I was like, why are we doing this twice on the same show?
Mm-hmm.
It was very weird. And I kept thinking, like, these guys need a pull-apart brawl. Like, this is probably the biggest match on the card. That's what one of these AEW go-home segments means. And so I love that Ospreay's like, how much am I going to get fined if I do this? And then he does it anyway. I love that. Okay. You know why? Because that tells you the concept of kayfabe money. And I'm a big fan of kayfabe money and people getting fines for various things and deciding it's worth it or not.
Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Because I didn't like it because it slowed down the segment. Would you have liked it more if he turned to Tony and said, hey, Tony, is it true the fine's $100,000 if I punch him in the face right now? Tony says yes, and then he just does it. So it takes 10 seconds instead of 50?
Yeah, yes, that would have been better.
Because that was my problem with it.
He even doesn't even turn it. I checked with Tony Khan, and he said if I punch you, it costs me $100,000. I think it's worth it. Boom, and then you
perfect. Yes, I'm fine with it then. Yes.
Yeah, but either way, I didn't mind that. I just wish it had gone on longer. It very quickly just kind of turned into guys doing wrestling moves on each other. I wanted a real pull-apart brawl. Mm-hmm. They get separated. Someone jumps onto the crowd of the other guy, or maybe MJF is outside the ring. Ospreay jumps out of the ring onto them. Give me that full, big pull-apart brawl as the kind of go-home segment. Instead, we got Diamond Ring and yada, yada. So, like, it was okay. It worked. I just felt like it would have added more to give a full-on real pull-apart brawl, which AEW does not do many of.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Now, in terms of a prediction for the match, there's no real need for additional heat on MJF, which would be the only reason for a title retention here. It's been clear from the moment he signed that Ospreay winning a title at Wembley Stadium during his first year in AEW was the plan. And while most of us thought it would be the main title, obviously it seems like that moment might be saved for 2026 when AEW returns to London for All In the stadium. While I have not been a fan of MJF's booking or promos, and certainly not the nationalism gimmick shift for a guy who doesn't give a fuck about America, there's no doubt that this will be among the favorites for match of the night because Ospreay is amazing and MJF is great in the ring. The crowd is going to be wild for Ospreay. They're going to be thunderous jeering MJF, and the pop will be enormous when Will ultimately walks out having regained the international title after hitting the Tiger Driver 91, which has been so massively telegraphed. It's only dwarfed by Bryan Danielson's storyline, which we will talk about in a couple of minutes. I simply cannot see booking this differently unless something crazy happens, like Wardlow returns to MJF's side. But after what went down last year through the Adam Cole storyline, that should not even be a consideration. So Ospreay walks out with the title after probably the second best match of the night behind only the main event.
Yes, Ospreay is winning this match for all the reasons that you said. My question, is this the main event of the show?
No, Swerve and Bryan is the main event.
Did they say that, or you just feel like 100% it has to be?
I think it 100% has to be. I believe they may have also said as much. I think Ospreay and MJF should be the mid-show main event, like the direct middle. I don't necessarily believe they should go back-to-back. It would be almost too much. Also, the Tony Storm Mariah May storyline, which is what we're going to talk about next, it's probably AEW's best long-term story. I don't want to say ever because the Elite story previously was extremely solid, the initial version of it. But it's probably the second best long-term story ever that the company has done in terms of length, in addition to the quality. And the women do deserve that number 2 spot. So I do believe this will be the mid-show main event. And I think it'll be worthwhile because if you have a 9-match card, you need that massive moment in the middle to kind of pick the energy back up and carry you through the second half of the show.
I would just say they ended the first All In with a callback to SummerSlam with the friends and the hugging and all that stuff. I could 100% see them calling back to that again with a mid-card title being the main event. And Will Ospreay is the future of this company. He's the hometown guy. He will get the biggest reactions of anything. I feel like this should be the main event of the show. It's your 2 biggest guys. I know it's not the world title, and I'm usually the guy who says the world title needs to be your main event. Now, depending on what the booking is for Swerve and Danielson, maybe it has to be the end. But I think this should be in the main event for those reasons.
Okay, fair enough. I disagree with you because it's not the world title. If it was, I would flip it. But yeah, I mean, Swerve and Bryan is so hot on its own that it deserves that spot. If it wasn't as hot, I would agree with you to flip it. But I think Swerve and Bryan's actually even hotter than Ospreay and MJF is, despite the fact that Ospreay's the hometown guy. So
it is, but I don't know if it's going to be as hot just because it's in England, you know? And if you're not going to be back till 2026, who the heck knows?
Yeah, who knows?
What will Ospreay's situation will be then at that
time?
But
Bryan is Bryan, though. I mean, it's a crowning. We'll talk about him in a minute. Let's move off of this. Let's go to the Women's Championship. Toni Storm against Mariah May. On Dynamite, we had a Women's Championship match for no good reason. Storm against Saraya. Harley distracted late, so Toni kissed her. Saraya then blatantly punched her off the apron, and Toni kissed her before hitting Storm Zero and getting the win. There was an homage to Johnny Saint with a British grap sequence in this match. It was done at maybe 1/4 the speed that he did it. This is something similar to Becky Lynch and Bayley. They did it, I believe, on an episode of Raw a couple years ago, and they did it well. This looked absolutely terrible, but I guess it was sweet to do it as an homage. Toni is super over. That allowed the suckfest of this match to basically get ignored. She took an extended ovation, so it was obvious a Mariah attack was coming, and it did from behind with the shoe. Then she cradled and kissed Toni's head and posed on the canvas. Now, I presume and hope there will be further go-home development on Collision, because this was weak as hell. One shot from a shoe, and Storm is KO'd. Plus, it was repetitive as hell and way less impactful than similar segments they've done previously. So, did not like the go-home for this at all. If this was the go-home, if they do more on Collision, then it was fine to just throw this on Dynamite.
Yeah, it was kind of whatever. Not a ton there. I got to say, like, the Toni Storm gimmick, which I have liked the whole time, does it feel, again, I'm not as connected in with everybody. Mm-hmm. Does it feel like everybody has come back around on it?
Come back around, meaning that they stopped liking it for a period of time? I think people have, I think most fans have loved it consistently. I have been lost on it, but a lot of fans just love it straight up.
Yeah, I've liked it the whole time. I remember there was a conversation about how it wasn't kind of going anywhere. My only thought is, do you feel like Mariah should be the heel in this? I mean, like, that's the story they've told, mm-hmm. But usually when you kind of have the teacher student, so to speak, it's usually the other one that ends up being the face in all of this.
The teacher getting jealous of the student's progress and like so on and so forth. You can do it both ways. I think the way they've done it is totally fine. Also, mm-hmm. Toni is so over that you really wouldn't want to make her the heel and force her into that role. When Mariah, by the way, is doing a great job as the heel. I think the bigger issue, though, going into this match is that May has absolutely dominated this feud, which mm-hmm. would really lead one to believe that Storm should retain the title and come out on top during this show. The problem with that is, like I said, this is a true long-term story. The best that AEW has put together over the last year, and ending that story with a title retention rather than the crowning of a new star would result in a huge pop for Storm, sure, but a huge lack of forward momentum for the division as a whole. That's why I hope there's more go home on Saturday, because I would love Toni to look stronger going in. That way Mariah could come out with the title. It's been a nearly 280-day reign for Storm at this juncture. And as far as I'm concerned, Chris, it's time for it to end. I do believe May becomes the new women's champion here. But again, the natural storytelling when you do an angle like this is that it ends with the babyface winning. Maybe they have something in their pocket, their back pocket, where May gets a heavy, kind of like Mercedes has, or someone comes in and gets her back. Saraya helps her out, get the win. I mean, I don't know exactly what they're going to do, but I don't know that logically you can end this match at Wembley Stadium without Mariah winning. The negative, though, to doing that, like I said, is that she's dominated Toni ever since she turned on her.
Mariah May looks and feels like a star. She has since she arrived. And I think you have to use this moment to crown your new star. Tony's been doing this for a while. She's been champ a bunch. Not to say that Mariah's dead in the water if she doesn't win it, but I feel like it's an opportunity to really kind of put the final stamp on, like, we've got a new star women's wrestler here, which I think is good, which I think would be good to have.
Yeah.
You know, with Jade Cargill no longer there, like, Mariah she feels like she has it. And you want to strike that while you can.
You said it feels like she has
It.
and you would be correct. She does have
It.
So yes, striking while the iron is hot, putting the title on her, it makes all the sense in the world. I really would not hate for Tony to take some time off, come back with a refreshed version of her timeless gimmick, maybe even evolving it like 20 years and just every time she goes away and comes back, she skips like a decade or 2 decades.
Yeah.
That could be really interesting to do.
Oh, man. That would be awesome. And that's how you keep a gimmick going.
Oh, yeah.
She comes back as like maybe she comes back as like the World War II poster woman or something like that. And then later she comes back as like a 1960s hippie. And then like there's so many places you could take it. That'd be amazing.
It would be fantastic if that's what happened. Every single time she comes back, she eventually wins a title. It could even be the TBS title. Then every time she loses it, she goes away and comes back as something different. It would be super cool to do it that way. I also just think getting a break from this version of the Storm character would make a lot of sense. So yeah, every reason in the world, I do believe May should win and will win the AEW Women's Championship here. Let's go ahead and move to the main event of the show, the AEW Championship on the line. Swerve Strickland defending against Bryan Danielson in a title versus career match. On Dynamite, Nigel McGuinness hosted a face-to-face, heavily putting over Swerve, given he hates Bryan and kayfabe. He took more shots at Danielson with Swerve in the ring, calling the champion an overwhelming favorite. Swerve said he would tear Bryan apart like all the others he's beaten, and he would do it purposefully, menacingly, and scientifically. He added that he would beat Danielson so bad he's not capable of returning to the ring. Even if he wanted to go back on the stipulation on the Indies or in another country, he would find him and destroy him. This went from powerful and on point to dragging and getting like more and more ridiculous as it continued. It was just Swerve droning on and on and on. Danielson eventually had enough, just like I did. He ran down the ramp to interrupt and immediately took Strickland out with a Bazaiku knee. Let me pause here. Chris, is there or is there not a fine situation in AEW where they cannot attack each other, right? We just discussed this. 2 segments. One, they didn't touch because of the fine. The other, Ospreay's like, hey, what's the fine? Okay, sure, I'll hit him anyway. Not only did Danielson hit him here without even thinking twice about it, no one mentioned it. Commentary didn't say, well, that'll be a fine.
Did they specifically say that nobody can touch each other?
I believe that was the stipulation. Yes, I believe that was the stipulation.
Because they said specifically, hey, Mercedes and Britt can't touch each other. Hey, MJF and Ospreay can't touch each other. But they didn't say it about these.
I think it was that no one is supposed to on the entire show. That it was my belief. And why would you make that stipulation for the other 2 matches, but not this one?
To just for segment purposes. That happens a lot.
But I'm talking about logic, though. It's illogical.
Yeah, but
if you're going to protect any match, it would be the main event with a guy who's said that he's injured and needs neck surgery. I'm just saying.
Yes,
that
is fair.
That is fair. Anyway, he grabs the mic after this, saying people may be confused because he doesn't brag about himself every week like everyone else does, and he may not use it as a catchphrase like others, but he's the best fucking wrestler in the world. Huge pop. Bryan said at Wembley Stadium in front of the fans who have paid to see him and his peers who have traveled with him for the last 25 years and in front of his family, he will leave his soul in the ring and become AEW champion. Then he called himself the American fucking Dragon and got the fans to chant yes, asking whether he will beat Swerve. Now, it may have been an uncharacteristically rough promo from Swerve, but Bryan was on his game here. We've seen this version of Danielson so many times, and he always delivers massively when it comes to go-home promos and building main event matches. This was an excellent end to the show with everyone chanting yes. Over-reliant on the F word, sure, but on a taped episode, that kind of leeway can be taken advantage of. They did that here. It helped sell the emotion and the passion. I loved everything Bryan did at the end of this program.
I thought it was fine. I thought it did the job. I wasn't like blown away by it. I thought the video package that they previously had done for Danielson was kind of like that was like the big thing for me. That was kind of the final stamp there. So it was fun. I tell you, Brian felt like a much bigger star here. I've not been loving Swerve through this reign for a few reasons, but sets up what will be a good match for sure.
Yeah, I've largely liked Swerve's reign, but I do agree in this segment, it was night and day. Now, maybe that was purposeful, but Swerve has shined on the mic in recent weeks. He did not on Wednesday. Now, everyone...
Here's what I think.
Sure.
My thing with Swerve is that he doesn't always feel like he's carrying himself as the champion. And I think as much as Prince Nana has been great, and that's a whole thing, sometimes I feel like it'd be better if Swerve came out by himself. And it would be more impactful if it was just him there. And especially in something like this, too. AEW kind of has a problem where everybody has somebody with them. And so the moments when somebody doesn't, it feels bigger. MJF, Ospreay was an example of that.
I'm wondering if it might be something from the standpoint of Swerve all these other weeks and months. He's been champion. He knows he's going to stay champion. He's puffing his chest out. And in reality, forget the kayfabe of it all. He's out there knowing, and I'll tell you my prediction in a minute, but you're going to get it right now. In 4 days, he's going to drop this title and not be the champion anymore. And like, how much can you believe in yourself when you're lying? You know, you're actively lying to the crowd. I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm just talking about the reality of it all.
You're saying in kayfabe he knows he's going to drop
No. In reality, I'm saying the person.
Okay.
The person in that moment, like, you know, there's wrestlers when they come out for matches and they know they're going to lose titles. You can see it on their face when they're making their entrance.
I always look for that.
Yeah.
When there's a big match, I always look at the person's eyes and wonder where it's going to go. And I got to say, I don't think I have a very good track record of guessing based on that.
What I'm saying, though, in this case is all these other weeks and months, you have Swerve out there. He knows he's winning the title. He's retaining the title. He's the face of the company. He's doing all this stuff. So his chest is puffed out and he's speaking with conviction and you believe every single word he says. And this time he knows that in a couple days, in reality, he's losing that strap. Maybe he just felt different emotionally, and maybe that's why the promo didn't connect. Maybe I am making all of that up, and some of you are listening like, Silver King, what the hell are you talking about? That was a great promo. For me, it wasn't. That's just my perspective. Maybe I'm wrong. We're speculating. We're analyzing. That's what we do here. Everyone listening to this podcast has known Brian was winning the AEW title from the second he became number one contender. And as we pointed out a month ago, it has now been completely telegraphed, like beat you over the head with a brick telegraphed, given the career stipulation being added when he had already previously said he would not be a full-time performer after this year. So from a prediction standpoint, I wish I had more to say and analyze, but it's pretty simple. Danielson walks out as the new AEW champion. Probably more interesting to discuss is what happens after he wins the title. But Chris, before we get to that, what is your prediction for the match?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Did Danielson say that he has to get neck surgery later this year?
Before the end of the year, he said.
Yeah. So maybe that was all just a swerve, no pun intended, to make people think Swerve is not going to win. But yeah, I think, Danielson hasn't held a single title in AEW, I don't think.
Correct.
And I know he kind of hasn't wanted to.
Also correct.
This and that, and whatever. But if you want to take this company, to the biggest level, you are still arguably the biggest star in the company. And it would behoove the company to put the belt on you and have you as the face of the company while you still can, even if it's for a brief period of time, especially if it's during a time when you're trying to close a television deal. And so I think Brian wins at this show. Doesn't mean I think he holds the belt forever, but I agree. I think Danielson probably wins. And if he is winning, that's probably a reason to close the show with this.
So I agree with both points that you made. Let's not forget, on this same show, we have the Casino Gauntlet. And we both predicted Hangman's going to win that, right? And he's the favorite to win that match. And it's important to remember that the Casino Gauntlet victory, I believe, is basically a Money in the Bank stipulation where he can decide to have a match at any point. Now, I don't know if he can run in and slide it in and do it the same way, but we saw that with Luchasaurus and Christian. I believe it was for the TNT title where they were just able to go make the match. And I believe they have said that the winner of the Casino Gauntlet gets their match anytime, anywhere. So I could see All In ending with Danielson celebrating, the crowd going wild, and Hangman either successfully cashing in or attempting, but being thwarted by Swerve out of respect for Bryan. Ultimately, whether that happens or not, I do not imagine Bryan holds this title long. This is 100% about the moment and getting him in the record books as an AEW champion. It's not like the title itself needs to be elevated, though you are right, having Bryan as the face of the company, if they could do that for 2, 3, or 4 months, that would be immense. I just don't think they're going to. Personally, just like you, despite Danielson being against it, I have long thought that AEW should have forced the strap on him far earlier.
Yes.
Because he does have a legitimate WWE fan base that maybe they're not going to watch him just do matches on television, but knowing he's the champion of the company in the main event, people might actually tune into AEW who otherwise would not, just to see Daniel Bryan, quote unquote, as their champion because they loved him so much in WWE. So one way or another, I have Bryan winning this match, and I legitimately believe he might drop that title, if not Sunday right away, perhaps even as soon as All Out. I don't know that he makes it to Grand Slam for that match against Darby Allin. I would not be shocked if Hangman Page or whoever wins that Casino Gauntlet ends up taking the AEW title before they get to Arthur Ashe Stadium.
So, to the first point about Bryan needing to win, the lineage and legacy and prestige of the AEW World title has been hurt by the fact that Cody Rhodes never held it, and that Bryan Danielson still hasn't held it. And I guess Adam Cole, too, for that matter. You want your biggest names to hold that title. The whole point, the whole thing they always say with wrestling is it's not about the title elevating you, it's about you elevating the title. So you got to put it on people who elevate the title. Bryan Danielson will elevate the title. My thought on when he drops the belt is Wrestle Dream in October.
Certainly possible because it's in Washington.
In Tacoma, just outside of Seattle, Washington. Would make a lot of sense. And if anything, that's where I thought it might have been you put the career on the line type of thing. If this really is going to be his last year of wrestling, or maybe it's not. I think he wins. I think he holds it until October, loses it in Washington.
That certainly makes all the sense in the world. I would be down for that. The other option is he loses the title, and before he goes off into the sunset, he's like, let me get one more opportunity, goes out on his back, loses that match in Washington, and then, calls it a full-time career because he's still going to wrestle occasionally. Yeah. He just won't be full-time. So a lot of different ways that this can go, but all of them start with Bryan Danielson winning the AEW title at All In. Chris, that wraps up the Ultimate Preview. So let's go ahead and move to our expectation grades for AEW All In. As I mentioned earlier in the show, you will be able to vote and share your pre-show expectation grade for AEW All In by following us on Twitter at Getting Overcast and voting in our poll, which will be published during 0 hour. We will also have a post-show poll where you can share your final grades for AEW All In immediately after the show, and we will reference both of those during our AEW All In Instant Analysis podcast, which will be published on Sunday night. As always, Chris, when we do our grades for these pay-per-views and premium live events, you get to go first. What is your pre-show expectation grade for All In London?
Oof. I'm going to go with an A because I love this card. I frankly don't want them to add anything to it. If you add anything to it, just put it on the 0 hour. I think your 9 main show matches, they're all really good and really interesting, except for the trios match, which is whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But everything else I'm interested in, and I think is really good. And I wouldn't want to water that down. They may end up doing that. I gave last year's show an A. I thought they really delivered on the biggest stage. AEW shows sometimes just lack the production and the, for lack of a better word, aura of the big WWE shows. They did that with Wembley last year. And I have to imagine they'll do it even better, not backstage apparently, but at least in front of the crowd. And I suspect they'll do that again. They'll do it even better. They want to put on the biggest, best show possible again while they're trying to close this TV deal. And there's just a lot on this card that I'm really interested in. I think will be really good. So I'm going to go with an A, like a low A, like a 94, 95 type of thing.
It's super interesting because, I mean, WrestleMania is the biggest show of the year, like bar none, no question, whatever. But in some ways, All In almost is more important for AEW than WrestleMania is for WWE, from the standpoint of this will be their biggest crowd every single year. And there will be more eyes on this show than any other show every single year. And because it's the number 2 company, that's more important than WWE, where sure, WrestleMania is the biggest show, but a shitload of people watch SummerSlam and a shitload of people watch the Royal Rumble. And a ton of people will end up watching Bash in Berlin because it's on Peacock and you're paying $7 to $10 to $15 a month to get it. Whereas you're spending, of course, $50 for All In. So it's just super interesting to me to put All In that kind of context. And I agree with you that this card is immensely strong. I disagree from the standpoint that the only match I don't care that much about is the trios. I don't care about the tag team title match. I don't care about Jericho and Hook, and the 0 hour match to me is meaningless. But that's still a small number. The vast majority of the card has a chance to massively deliver. I mean, just the final 3 matches we talked about, if you put those in a silo and you did that with like 2 undercard matches, you have a potential A show. Like, that's just the truth. Overall, though, I'm grading the entire show, not just match quality. And because that low card, or I should say the mid card and the lower part of this particular card isn't speaking to me that much, I cannot go with a full A as an expectation grade. Now, they may get it at the end of the day, very possible. But I am extremely high on this. I know I've been critical of some of the build. Much of the build probably is a better way to phrase that. Doesn't mean I don't care about the matches, the storylines, and the show in totality. So I'm close to you, but I'm not where you are. And I'm glad that we're different for a change. I'm at an A-, and I'm going to go 93 out of 100. So the highest A-. That gives them a significant opportunity to exceed my expectations, but also some room to fall below them, yet still be a great show. It can be a 90, a 91, still be an A-, but maybe not meet my lofty expectations. And I think a 93 going in is a really high expectation grade. So we're pretty much on the same page. We're expecting a great show this coming Sunday. And I got to tell you, I'm super interested, not just in All In, but I'm curious to see if what happens on that show builds to All Out, or if they're just going to kind of throw that all together on the Dynamite afterward. That's going to be super interesting.
It is great that we don't have 2 shows back-to-back weeks. That was so freaking stupid.
But still, 2 weeks is not a lot of time, though. I mean, that's rough.
It's not. They shouldn't be doing this. Even if All Out ended up being a surprisingly good show as it was last year.
It was last year.
You got to put everything into All In. It's the name of the show that you're all in. And last year, it felt like they were saving things from their biggest show. This year, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like they are going all in on this show.
It does.
And that's one thing that makes me more excited about it.
And I want to make this clear. I don't want this to happen at all. Okay. But the way to do All In and All Out, if you were going to, would be to do a 2-night pay-per-view. The first night's All In, the second night's All Out. Like, that's the way you accomplish that. You don't do it the next week or 2 weeks later and make both a pay-per-view that's $50 each. And you do 2 back-to-back, you do $65 or something like that. And you get everyone to buy them in a package. And I know they're selling a package for both. I think it's like $75, something like that. But it's different when it's back-to-back nights as opposed to 1 week and then 2 weeks later, which, if my schedule in my brain is correct, is also week 1 of the NFL season, which of course is not ideal. I could be wrong about that, but I think that's correct. Anyway, We went long on the show, longer than expected. Chris, you and I were talking about doing a 45-minute Ultimate preview. We ended up doing an hour and 15, but that's what we do here on the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. We are comprehensive, and we try to give you as much analysis for this dumb sport that we love so much as possible. Thank you all for listening to this episode. A reminder, we will be back, same bat time, same bat channel next week with your NXT No Mercy Ultimate preview. On Tuesday, between the two shows, we will have your WWE Bash in Berlin Ultimate preview. And of course, Sunday night, as soon as All In goes off the air, we will have your AEW All In instant analysis. Do not miss it. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you have not already. On the way out, allow the Silver King to remind you that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
So you know what to do. Head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. If you leave a 5-star written review, we will read it live right here on the show. Subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast. Make sure you vote in those polls on Sunday. Please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well. $5 a month, $50 for the entire year. You're a Getting Overhead, an official Getting Overhead. You get bonus audio, instant reaction to the major shows, and exclusive news posts on Friday. You can get all of that by going to buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Thanks to Vintage Chris Vanini for joining your boy, the Silver King Adam Silverstein, for this AEW All In Ultimate preview. For both of us, it is time to sign off and leave you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.